The thing about family is that you never see it coming. The knife in the back, I mean. You're looking the other way, smiling at some memory of birthday candles or baseball games, and then you feel it. Cold, sharp, familiar hands holding the handle. My son Evan showed up on a Tuesday afternoon without calling first. That should have been my first clue. The kid who used to spend every Sunday at our dinner table suddenly couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone anymore. But there he was, standing in my driveway in his pressed khakis and company polo, looking at my truck like it personally offended him. "Hey, Dad," he said, flashing that smile he probably practiced in the mirror, the one he used on clients and managers. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by. I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's sedan, replacing her serpentine belt. 73 years old, and she still drove that thing like she was running moonshine. I wiped my hands on a rag and straightened up, feeling every one of my 52 years in my lower back. Quote 2, I repeated. Quota 3. He laughed, that forced corporate laugh. Quote 4. Quote 5. I said. Quote Wukten. He walked over to my truck, a 2015 Ford F-150 that had seen better days but ran like a dream because I actually maintained it. He circled it slowly, hands in his pockets, head tilted like he was inspecting a used car on a lot. Quote 7. He asked. Quote. Nintawin 9. I stared at him. Quote. 10. Quote. 11. He crouched down near the front wheel well, peering underneath. Quote 12, quote 13, quote 14, quote 15. He stood up, brushing off his knees even though the driveway was clean. Quote 16. And there it was, that phrase. Quote 17. Like I was some weekend hobbyist who didn't know a crankshaft from a camshaft. I appreciate the concern, I said, keeping my voice level, but the truck is fine. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something cold. Then the smile came back, bright and empty. Okay, Dad. Just wanted to make sure. You know how Mom worries. Does she? Of course. We both do. He checked his watch, one of those smart ones that probably cost more than my truck payment. I should get going. Tell Mom I said hi. Will do. I watched him walk to his Audi, pristine and black and probably leased. He waved once before pulling away, and I stood there in the driveway with grease under my fingernails and a strange, cold feeling in my gut. Because nothing says love like a surprise inspection from a son who hasn't visited since tax season. Mara came home an hour later, carrying groceries and wearing her scrubs from the hospital lab. She was 3 years younger than me, but looked 10 years younger than that, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a wit that could cut glass. Quote, 25. I said, helping her with the bags. She paused mid-step. Quote, 26. Quote, 27. Quote, well, 28. Her tone could have frozen water. Quote, 29. Quote, 30. Quote, 31. She started unpacking groceries, her movements precise and efficient. Quote, 32. Quote, 33. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. Quote, 34. Quote, 35. Quote, 36. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mara was snoring softly beside me, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. The way Evan had circled the truck, the way he'd crouched by the wheel well, the way he'd looked at me when I refused his offer. At 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep. I pulled on jeans and a jacket and went outside with a flashlight. The street was quiet. Suburban silence, broken only by the distant bark of a dog and the hum of the Johnson's pool filter. I walked to my truck and dropped to my hands and knees, playing the flashlight beam along the undercarriage. It took me 10 minutes to find it. A small black box, maybe 3 inches by 2 inches, magnetic mounting, tucked up behind the rear axle where nobody would see it unless they were looking. Professional grade, not some cheap tracker from a spy store. I sat back on my heels, flashlight still on the device, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise, exactly. More like confirmation of something I'd already known but hadn't wanted to believe. My son had put a tracker on my truck. I could have confronted him right then. Called him up, demanded an explanation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of finding his report card in the trash when he was 12, the one with the D in math that he'd forged my signature on. Maybe it was the time I'd caught him lying about where he'd been on a Saturday night, the story slipping and changing every time I asked a question. Evan was good at lying, always had been. And if I confronted him now, he'd have an excuse ready. Something plausible. Something that would make me feel guilty for doubting him. So instead, I did something else. I removed the tracker carefully, noting the model number and manufacturer. Then I went inside, found a padded envelope, and wrote an address on it. The address of a commercial warehouse in Edmonton, Alberta. A place I'd worked with years ago when I was doing long-haul consulting. A place that received shipments from all over North America. I dropped the envelope in a mailbox on my way to work the next morning, and then I waited. Mara noticed I was distracted. She always noticed. "What's going on?" she asked over dinner that night. "Just thinking." "About?" I told her about the tracker, told her what I'd done. She set down her fork and looked at me with those sharp, analytical eyes. "Quote 40, she said. Quote 41, then quote 42, quote 43, quote 44, Sue, quote 45. She nodded slowly. Quote 46, go to quote 47. But that was a lie. I knew exactly what I thought. I thought my son was using me for something. I thought he'd looked at his aging father and seen an opportunity. I thought the boy I'd raised, the one I'd taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball and change a tire, had turned into someone I didn't recognize, and I thought I was about to find out just how far he'd go. The call came 12 hours after I'd mailed the tracker. I was in my garage workshop, rebuilding a carburetor for a '68 Mustang when my phone rang. Unknown number, Alberta area code. "Hello? Is this Dean Calder?" A man's voice, professional, slightly confused. Quote 50. Quote 51. I sat down on my work stool, feeling something click into place in my mind. Unkri quote 52. I repeated. Unkri quote 53. And quote 54. I heard keys clicking. Quote 55. And quote 56. I said slowly. Quote 57. Quote 58. He quote 59. I hung up before he could ask more questions. Mara found me sitting in the garage 20 minutes later, still holding the phone. Quote 60, she asked. Or quote 61. I said. Quote 62, she frowned. Quote 63, and quote 64. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. That's quote 65. Mara said carefully. Quote 66, quote 67, quote 68, quote 69. She pulled over a chair and sat down across from me. Quote 70. This was Mara's way. Break it down, analyze it, find the pattern. Fact 1, I said. Evan visited without calling. Fact 2, he wanted to inspect my truck, specifically. Fact 3, I found a company tracker hidden under it. Fact 4, that tracker is registered to his employer. Fact 5, Mara added, he didn't ask for money or help, so this isn't about needing something from you. This is about monitoring you. But why? That's what we need to find out. She stood up. And we need to do it carefully. Because if Evan is using company resources to track his father, either he's having some kind of breakdown, or he's involved in something worse. I looked up at her. Worse? Dean, you don't use a $500 tracking device just because you're worried about Dad's driving. You use it because you need to know where someone is at all times, which means either he's paranoid or he's covering something up. Or both. Or both. That night, I started making a list. Everything I knew about Evan's life. Everything that didn't quite add up. He'd gotten promoted 6 months ago to senior logistics manager. Big title, big raise, supposedly. But when we'd had dinner at his house last Christmas, I'd noticed things. New furniture, expensive electronics, a kitchen renovation that must have cost $40,000. All on a salary that, even with the promotion, shouldn't have stretched that far. And Lena, his wife. The lifestyle blogger who posted carefully filtered photos of their perfect life. The woman who'd barely spoken to me at that dinner, too busy on her phone to notice when I'd asked her a direct question. Something was wrong in that house. I'd felt it then, but I'd pushed it aside, told myself I was being paranoid, told myself Evan was an adult now and I needed to let him live his own life. But now, with the tracker, with the lies, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Bobby's garage, a gruff voice answered. Bobby, it's Dean Calder. A pause. Dean? Christ, man. Long time. Too long. Listen, I need a favor. Bobby Randall ran a small garage on the east side of town, the kind of place where mechanics and truckers and freight workers gathered to drink coffee and trade gossip. If something was happening in the logistics world, Bobby would know about it. What kind of favor? He asked. Information about Titan Freight Solutions. Another pause, longer this time. That's your son's company, isn't it? Yeah. Dean, if you're asking what I think you're asking, I am. He sighed. Come by tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. before the crowd shows up. I drove to Bobby's garage the next morning with the sunrise in my rearview mirror. The place hadn't changed. Same peeling paint, same crooked sign, same smell of motor oil and coffee that hit you the moment you walked through the door. Bobby was waiting for me, leaning against his desk with his arms crossed. He was my age, built like a fire hydrant, with a beard that would make a lumberjack jealous. Coffee, he offered. Please. He poured 2 cups from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration and handed me one. So, he said, Titan Freight. What do you know? I know they're a big company. I know they handle shipping routes all across the Midwest, and I know they have been having problems. What kind of problems? Bobby took a sip of coffee. The kind that involves missing shipments, confused manifests, and a whole lot of finger-pointing. Word is, someone in upper management screwed up a major contract about 6 months ago. Cost the company millions. 6 months ago, when Evan got promoted. Do you know who? I asked. No names, just rumors. But whoever it was, they're scrambling to cover it up. Trying to pin it on lower-level employees, shift the blame, that sort of thing. And what about the people working there? What do they say? Bobby gave me a long look. You sure you want to hear this? I'm here, aren't I? He set down his coffee cup. I've had a couple of guys from Titan come through here. They talk, and what they say is that there's a manager, mid-30s, hotshot type, drives an Audi, married to some Instagram influencer. And apparently this guy's been telling everyone his dad is slipping, can't be trusted. Needs to be taken care of. My hands tightened on the coffee cup. He say that? I asked quietly. More than once, from what I hear. The guys think it's weird, you know? Why would you talk about your dad like that at work? Why indeed? Bobby leaned forward. Dean, whatever's going on with your son, be careful. People who talk like that, they're usually hiding something, and they don't like it when people start digging. I finished my coffee and stood up. Thanks, Bobby. Anytime. And Dean, if you need help, you call me. I drove home with my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel and Bobby's words echoing in my head. My dad's slipping. Can't be trusted. Needs to be taken care of. My son was telling people I was incompetent, setting up a narrative, building a story where poor Evan had to manage his aging, unreliable father, and I was starting to understand why. Mara was waiting for me when I got home. She took one look at my face and said, quote, I told her everything. The rumors about the company, the missing shipments, Evan's comments about me. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing colder with every sentence. He's setting you up, she said when I finished. For what? I don't know yet, but think about it. He puts a company tracker on your truck. He tells coworkers you're incompetent. He creates a paper trail that says his dad can't be trusted. Why would he do all that? To cover something up? Right. Something at work. Something big enough that he needs a scapegoat. And I'm the scapegoat. You're the scapegoat. I sat down at the kitchen table and put my head in my hands. I thought he was better than this. Mara's hand touched my shoulder, warm and solid. Quote, 122. I looked up at her. Quote, 1 in 23, thought I would quote, 1 in 24, quote, 125. She smiled, sharp and cold, quote, 126. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience. You can't just lash out. You have to plan. You have to think. You have to become someone else for a while, someone cold and calculating and willing to do what needs to be done. I'd never thought of myself as that person. But watching my son destroy me from the inside out had a way of changing things. Mara and I spent the next 3 days building a timeline. We started with Evan's promotion 6 months ago and worked backward. Every visit, every phone call, every odd comment or strange request, we wrote it all down, looking for patterns, and we found them. 3 months ago, Evan had asked to borrow my truck for a weekend, said his Audi was in the shop and he needed to help a friend move. I'd said yes, of course. What father wouldn't? But now, looking back, I remembered he'd returned it on Monday, not Sunday, an extra day that he'd never explained. 2 months ago, he'd asked for copies of my insurance documents, said he was helping me organize my paperwork. I'd thought it was sweet, thoughtful. Now I wondered what he'd really needed them for. And just last month, he'd invited us to dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard of. Expensive and downtown, the kind of place with cloth napkins and sommeliers. He'd paid, insisted on it, and the whole time, He'd been asking me questions about my daily routine, where I went, who I saw, what I did. I'd thought he was just making conversation. Métis, he was mapping you, Mara said, staring at the timeline. Learning your schedule, your habits, building a profile. But why? I think I know. She pulled out her laptop and started typing. If Evan caused that problem at work, the one Bobby mentioned, he'd need to shift the blame. But he can't just make up a scapegoat. It has to be someone real, someone with access to vehicles and shipping information. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. You used to work in long-haul logistics. You still have contacts in the industry. And if Evan could somehow make it look like you were involved, if he could create evidence that his own father was the one who screwed up that contract, then he saves his career and destroys mine. She nodded. And he gets away with it because who's going to believe an aging mechanic over a successful logistics manager? I felt sick. He's been planning this for months. Probably longer. This isn't something you throw together overnight. I stood up and walked to the window. Our neighborhood looked peaceful. Tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, families living their normal lives. But inside our house, everything had changed. I want to confront him, I said. I want to look him in the eye and ask him why. You can't. Not yet. The moment you confront him, he'll know you're on to him, and he'll accelerate whatever he's planning. So what do? We beat him at his own game. We gather evidence, real evidence, and then we burn his world down. I turned to look at her, my wife, my partner, the woman who'd stood beside me for 27 years. There was something fierce in her eyes now, something protective and dangerous. Quote 143. I said, quote 144. She closed her laptop. Quote 145. Over the next week, I became someone I'd never been before, a spy, a detective, a man with a mission. I started with Evan's neighborhood, drove past his house at different times of day, watching patterns. Lena left every morning at 9, usually wearing workout clothes, always with her phone in hand. Evan left at 7:30, dressed for the office. They came home separately, rarely together. I followed Lena one morning, feeling ridiculous and necessary at the same time. She drove to a coffee shop in an upscale part of town and met a man there, mid-30s, athletic build, expensive camera hanging from his neck. The photographer. Had to be. They sat close. Too close. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm in a way that wasn't professional. And when they left, 45 minutes later, they left in the same car. His car. I followed them to a hotel. They went inside together. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, feeling something dark and cold settle in my chest. Not satisfaction, exactly. More like confirmation. My son's marriage was a lie. His perfect life was a performance. And Lena, the woman who posted filtered photos of their happiness online, was sleeping with her photographer. The affair itself didn't matter, but the dishonesty did, because if they were lying about this, what else were they lying about? I drove to Titan Freight Solutions next, parked across the street in a shopping center lot and watched the building. It was modern, all glass and steel, with the company logo gleaming in the sun. Trucks came and went from the loading bays. Employees in company uniforms moved between buildings, and eventually Evan emerged. He walked with another man, both of them carrying coffees, both of them looking stressed. They stood by the loading dock, talking animatedly. Evan was gesturing, his face red. The other man was shaking his head. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the body language. Tension, disagreement, fear. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. Not sure what I'd use them for yet, but Mara had taught me to document everything. That night, I went to a bar near the Titan offices, the kind of place where workers stopped after their shifts to decompress. I sat at the bar, ordered a beer, and listened. It took an hour before I heard something useful. 2 men in Titan uniforms sat down a few stools away from me, both of them looking exhausted. They ordered drinks and started talking, loudly enough that I could hear. "I'm telling you, man, it's all going to come down eventually," one of them said. "You think so?" "Has to. You can't hide that kind of screw-up forever. Someone's going to figure out where that shipment really went. And then what? Then whoever's responsible is done, fired, probably sued, maybe even arrested if they can prove fraud." The second man whistled low. "All that over one shipment?" It wasn't just any shipment. It was military-grade parts, $5 million worth. And someone rerouted it to a private buyer. Pocketed the difference. Jesus. Yeah. And I heard management already knows who did it. They're just gathering evidence before they make a move. I gripped my beer bottle so hard I thought it might shatter. Military-grade parts. $5 million. rerouted to a private buyer. And Evan was in senior logistics. Evan had access to shipment manifests. Evan had been promoted right when this happened. Oh, God. My son wasn't just covering up a mistake. He was covering up a crime. I left the bar and drove home in a daze. Mara took one look at me and pulled me inside. Quote 155. I told her everything I'd learned. About Lena's affair, about Evan's argument at work, about the overheard conversation in the bar. She listened, her expression growing darker with every word. This is bigger than we thought, she said quietly. Way bigger. If what those men said is true, Evan committed fraud, possibly embezzlement, and he's trying to pin it on you. How? I haven't worked in logistics in years. Doesn't matter. He just needs to create reasonable doubt. Make it look like you had opportunity and motive. Plant some evidence. Make you the suspect while he walks away clean. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of it all crash over me. He's my son. I know. I taught him to throw a baseball. I sat with him when he had nightmares. I helped him with his homework, and now he's trying to frame me for a crime he committed. Mara sat beside me and took my hand. Then we stop him. Not because he's your son, because he's a criminal who chose to hurt innocent people, including you. How do we prove it? We keep digging, and we make him nervous enough to make a mistake. The next morning, I did something that would have seemed crazy a week ago. I went back to the Canadian warehouse and called Tom Brennan again. Mr. Brennan, this is Dean Calder. We spoke about the tracking device. Oh, right. Did you figure out what happened? I think so, but I need to ask you something. That device, the one I sent you, is there any way to see its tracking history, where it's been? Maybe. These commercial trackers usually have digital logs, but you'd need to contact the company that owns it. They'd have access to the full data. And if I wanted to report that someone was using company equipment illegally? A pause. That's a different conversation. You'd need to contact the company's internal security or compliance department. But Mr. Calder, are you saying someone stole this tracker? Something like that. Thanks for your help. I hung up and looked at Mara. I'm going to do it, I said. Do what? Contact Titan's internal security. Tell them I found a company tracker on my personal vehicle. Show them the evidence. Let them investigate. Dean, if you do that, Evan will know you're on to him. Good. Let him sweat. Let him wonder what I know and what I can prove, because right now he thinks I'm just a dumb old man he can manipulate. Time to show him he's wrong. Mara smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Quote 29. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I documented everything, took photos of where I'd found the tracker, wrote down dates and times, printed out the timeline Mara and I had created, made copies of everything. And then I called Titan Freight Solutions and asked to speak to internal security. The woman who answered sounded bored. Internal security, this is Janet. My name is Dean Calder. I need to report the unauthorized use of company equipment. Her tone sharpened. What kind of equipment? A GPS tracking device. Serial number TX449772B. I found it attached to my personal vehicle without my knowledge or consent. I heard keys clicking. And you're saying this device belongs to Titan? According to the warehouse manager in Edmonton who scanned it, yes. Edmonton? Why was it in Canada? Because I mailed it there after I found it on my truck. More clicking, a longer pause. Mr. Calder, I'm going to need you to come in and file a formal report. Can you come to our offices tomorrow? Absolutely. 9 a.m.? I'll be there. I hung up and looked at Mara. It's done. No going back now. No going back. That night, my phone rang. Evan's number. I almost didn't answer. But Mara nodded at me, and I picked up. Hey, Dad. His voice was casual. Too casual. How's it going? Fine. You? Good, good. Listen, I was thinking we should get together this weekend. Maybe dinner, my treat. Why? A pause. Do I need a reason to have dinner with my dad? These days? Yeah, you do. Another pause, longer this time. Dad, is everything okay? You sound upset. I'm fine, Evan. Just busy. Okay. Well, think about dinner. I'll call you later in the week. He hung up. Mara was watching me. He knows something. Maybe. No, maybe about it. He never calls, never invites us anywhere. And now, suddenly, he wants dinner. He's checking on you, trying to figure out what you know. Then let him wonder. I barely slept that night. Kept thinking about the meeting tomorrow. Kept imagining walking into Titan's offices, sitting across from internal security, telling them what I'd found. Kept imagining Evan's face when he found out. At 8:30 the next morning, I pulled into the Titan Freight Solutions parking lot. The building looked different today. Not impressive, just a place where crimes were committed and people looked the other way. I walked through the glass doors into a lobby with marble floors and corporate art on the walls. Told the receptionist I had an appointment with internal security. She made a call. 2 minutes later, a woman emerged from an elevator. Mid-40s, dark suit, ID badge hanging from her neck. Quote 209. She led me to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Windowless, recording camera in the corner. Very official. Quote 210, quote 212. She sat across from me and pulled out a tablet. Quote 212, quote 213, quote 214, quote 215, quote 216, quote 217. She studied me for a moment. Quote 218, quote 20 guy. I told her everything. Evan's visit, the inspection, finding the tracker, mailing it to Edmonton. The phone call from Tom Brennan. I showed her my documentation, photos, dates, times. She took notes, asking questions occasionally, but mostly letting me talk. When I finished, she set down her tablet and leaned back in her chair. Mr. Calder, do you know why someone would attach a company tracker to your vehicle? I have a theory. I'd like to hear it. My son works here, Evan Calder, senior logistics manager, and I think he's using company resources to monitor me without authorization. Her expression didn't change. Quote 25. Quote 220. She stood up. Quote 227. She left me alone in the conference room, 5 minutes, 10, 15. When she came back, she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit followed her. Late 50s, graying hair, the kind of presence that said executive. Mr. Calder, this is David Klein, our vice president of operations. Klein shook my hand. His grip was firm. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take misuse of company property very seriously. I appreciate that. I understand your son works in our logistics department. He does. And you believe he may have accessed a company tracker without authorization. I don't just believe it. The serial number proves it. Klein exchanged a glance with Janet. Mr. Calder, I need you to understand something. What you're describing, if true, is a serious breach of company policy. It's also potentially illegal. If we investigate this and find evidence of wrongdoing, there will be consequences. Severe ones. I understand. And you still want us to proceed? I thought about Evan, about the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. Thought about the tracker on my truck and the lies he'd told and the way he'd looked at me in my own driveway like I was a problem to be managed. Yes, I said. I want you to proceed. Klein nodded. Then we will. Janet, open a formal investigation. I want a full audit of our tracking device inventory. I want to know who accessed what, when, and why. And I want daily updates. Yes, sir. He turned back to me. Mr. Calder, this may take some time. We'll need to verify your claims, review security footage, check system logs. But I promise you, if someone in this company violated policy, they will be held accountable. Thank you. One more thing. Do not discuss this investigation with anyone, including your son. Do you understand? I understand. I left the building feeling lighter than I had in days. The trap was set, the wheels were turning, and Evan had no idea what was coming. Mara was waiting for me at home, pacing the kitchen. How did it go? She asked. They're investigating. She threw her arms around me. Thank God. They said not to tell Evan. Of course not. Let him think everything's fine. Let him keep digging his own grave. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. Hey, Dad, still thinking about that dinner. How about this Saturday? My place. Just family. I showed the text to Mara. He's panicking, she said. Why do you say that? Because he's suddenly very interested in keeping tabs on you. He wants you close. Wants to make sure you're not doing anything he needs to worry about. She smiled. Too late for that. I texted back. Sure. What time? The response came immediately. 6. See you then. Saturday. 3 days away. 3 days for internal security to dig into the tracker's history. 3 days for them to build their case. 3 days for Evan to realize his world was about to collapse. Quote 249. I said. Mara's expression hardened. Don't. He made his choice. He tried to destroy you. Now he gets to live with the consequences. She was right. I knew she was right. But he was still my son, and that made it hurt. Sunday passed in a strange fog. Mara and I moved through our house like ghosts, both of us thinking about tomorrow, about what Janet Torres would say, about what evidence they'd found, about how much longer this could go on before something broke. I tried to distract myself with work, went out to my garage and started rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Patterson's sedan. But my hands shook, and I had to stop after 10 minutes. Mara found me sitting on my work stool, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. "No." She pulled over a chair and sat beside me. "Talk to me." I keep thinking about when Evan was little, when he was 7, maybe 8. He came home from school crying because some kid had pushed him off the monkey bars. I asked him what happened, and he told me this elaborate story about how the other kid was a bully, how Evan had tried to help someone else, how it was all so unfair. I remember that. I went to the school the next day, ready to raise hell, ready to protect my son. I looked at her. "And you know what the teacher told me?" "What?" "That Evan had pushed the other kid first, that Evan had lied to me, that he'd been the bully all along." Mara nodded slowly. "He learned early that lying worked. I should have done more, should have been harder on him, should have made him understand that actions have consequences." "You did your best." "Did I?" "Because my best raised a man who put a tracker on his own father's truck." She took my hand. "Dean, you're not responsible for the choices Evan made as an adult. You taught him right from wrong. You gave him every advantage. What he did with that? That's on him." "I know, but it still hurts." "It should hurt. He's your son. But that doesn't mean you let him win." I squeezed her hand. "What would I do without you?" "Probably fall apart. Lucky for you, I'm not going anywhere." We ordered pizza for dinner, sat on the couch watching some mindless movie neither of us paid attention to. And when night finally came, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the hours crawl by like prisoners counting down to execution. At 7 a.m., I gave up on sleep and got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table watching the sun rise through the window. Mara joined me a few minutes later, already dressed. "You're coming with me?" I asked. "Obviously. You think I'm missing this?" "It might just be paperwork. Forms to sign. Nothing dramatic." She gave me a look. "When has anything about this been undramatic?" She had a point. We arrived at Titan Freight Solutions at 8:30. Too early. But I couldn't sit at home anymore. Couldn't pace the floors. Couldn't do anything except move forward. Janet Torres met us in the lobby at exactly 9 a.m. She looked different today, more formal, more tense. Quote 283. She glanced at Mara. Quote 284. Quote 285. I said. Janet hesitated, then nodded. Quote 286. She led us to a different conference room this time, bigger, with more chairs. And when we entered, I saw why. David Klein was there, Rebecca Stanton, the lawyer, and 3 other people I didn't recognize. 2 men in suits, 1 woman with a badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. and Mrs. Calder," Klein said, standing. "Please, sit down." We sat. The 3 strangers remained standing. "I'm going to get right to it," Klein began. "Our investigation into the tracking device incident has uncovered some serious irregularities, not just regarding the device itself, but regarding broader patterns of misconduct within our logistics department." My heart was pounding. "What kind of misconduct?" "The kind that involves fraud, embezzlement, and unauthorized rerouting of company shipments." He gestured to the woman with the badge. "This is Special Agent Carolyn Pierce from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She and her colleagues have been working with us for the past 72 hours. FBE. Jesus Christ. Agent Pierce sat down across from us. "Mr. Calder, we understand you filed a complaint about a tracking device. During Titan's investigation, they discovered evidence of a much larger scheme, a scheme involving the theft and resale of military-grade equipment." Mara's hand found mine again. Quote 295. I asked, on quote 296. Pierce said, quote 297, quote 21218, quote 2199. The room went silent. Klein cleared his throat. Quote 300, quote 3011, quote 2. I felt sick. Quote 303, quote 304. Mara spoke for the first time. Quote 305. Everyone in the room exchanged glances. Rebecca Stanton leaned forward. Quote 306, quote 307. I said quietly, and quote 308. Agent Pierce's expression softened. "Mr. Calder, I know this is difficult, but yes, based on the evidence we've gathered, Evan Calder is our primary suspect. We have proof that he accessed the tracking device logs, proof that he falsified shipment manifests, proof that he received payments from an offshore account linked to the buyers of the stolen goods." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "How much?" I asked. "How much did he steal?" Approximately $8 million worth of equipment over an 8-month period. He received roughly $1.2 million as his cut. $1.2 million. My son had sold out his own father for $1.2 million. What happens now? Mara asked. We're building a case, Pierce said. We have warrants being prepared. We'll be executing them within the next 48 hours. When we do, we'll be making arrests. Arrests, plural? Evan wasn't working alone. He had help. Someone who provided offshore banking connections. Someone who helped create the fake documentation. Lena, it had to be. What do you need from us? I asked. Your cooperation. We'll need you to provide testimony about the tracker, about Evan's behavior, about anything unusual you've observed, and we need you to stay quiet. If Evan learns that we're closing in, he might run. We won't say anything. Klein stood up. Mr. Calder, I want you to know that Titan takes full responsibility for what happened here. Our security protocols failed, our oversight failed, and an employee used our company to commit crimes and target his own father. We're deeply sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back the last 6 months. No, it doesn't, but we're going to make sure everyone involved is held accountable. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Forms to sign. Contact information exchanged. Promises to keep us informed. We walked out of the building into bright sunshine that felt wrong. Too cheerful, too normal. The weeks after my deposition crawled by in a haze of mundane routines and restless nights. I worked in my garage, fixed cars, helped neighbors with their oil changes and brake jobs. Tried to pretend that life was normal, but it wasn't, and it never would be again. The news broke 3 days after my deposition. Local first, then regional. Quote, at 3:24. The articles were careful, named Evan and Lena, outlined the charges, mentioned that family members were cooperating with federal investigators. My phone exploded. Friends calling to ask if it was true, neighbors wanting to know what happened, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly very concerned about our well-being. I let them all go to voicemail. Bobby showed up on a Saturday morning with coffee and donuts. Figured you might not be answering the door for anyone, he said when I let him in. You figured right. We sat in my garage, drank coffee, didn't talk about Evan for a long time. Finally, Bobby said, what, quote, 327, quote, 3 Kate, and quote, 329. He ate a donut, clock, quote, 330, quote, 331, height, quote, 332, and quote, 333, quote, 334. Mara came out to the garage with fresh coffee. Quote, 335, quote, 336, quote, 337, quote, 338. They talked around me for a while. Easy conversation, normal things, the weather, Bobby's garage, a customer who'd tried to change her own oil and somehow managed to drain the transmission fluid instead. It felt good, familiar, like maybe eventually life could have moments of normal again. After Bobby left, Mara and I sat in the kitchen. Quote, I said, quote, 340, quote, 3401, quote, 34.2, quote, 34 run, quote, 344, quote, 345. She smiled sadly. Her quote, 3496. A week later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I almost threw it away without opening it, but something made me read it. Quote, 34C7. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. Mara found me sitting at the kitchen table an hour later, staring at nothing. Quote, 3:48. She asked. I handed her the letter. She read it. Her expression didn't change. What do you think? I asked. I think it's a manipulation. One last attempt to make you feel guilty, to make you question yourself, to make you think maybe you were too harsh. You think so? I know so. Dean, if Evan was truly sorry, he would have apologized before he got caught. Before the FBI showed up, before his lawyer told him to start building sympathy. This isn't remorse. This is strategy. I nodded. You're right. Of course I'm right. I'm always right. Despite everything, I smiled. But the letter stayed in the drawer. And sometimes, late at night, I'd take it out and read it again. Trying to find something genuine in those words. Trying to see the son I remembered instead of the criminal he'd become. I never found it. 2 months after the arrests, Helen Vance called. Mr. Calder, I wanted to update you on the case. Evan's attorney has approached us about a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? He'd plead guilty to the fraud and embezzlement charges. In exchange, we'd recommend a reduced sentence, 15 years instead of 30. And what do you think? I think it saves us a trial, saves you from having to testify publicly, gets a conviction on record, But it also means Evan admits to everything, no appeals, no technicalities, just a guilty plea and time served. What about Lena? She's taking a separate deal, 10 years. She had less direct involvement, but she's still culpable. I was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Calder, what do you think? I think 15 years is too generous, but I also think you're right. A trial would be hell for everyone, so if this gets us a conviction, I'm okay with it. All right, I'll let you know when the plea hearing is scheduled. Will I have to be there? No, but you can be if you want. Victims often give impact statements at sentencing hearings. Do I count as a victim if he's my son? Mr. Calder, you count as a victim especially because he's your son. The plea hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I debated whether to go, whether to stand in that courtroom and watch my son admit to his crimes. Mara said it was my choice, that she'd support me either way. In the end, I went. The courthouse was downtown, all marble and wood paneling and fluorescent lights. I sat in the back row of the gallery wearing a suit I'd bought for my brother's funeral 10 years ago. Evan was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked thinner, older, defeated. His lawyer stood beside him. The prosecutor stood across the aisle. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked down from the bench. Quote, 369. She began. Quote, 370. Evan's voice was barely audible. Guilty, Your Honor. And you understand that by pleading guilty, you're waiving your right to a trial? Yes, Your Honor. And you understand the sentencing guidelines for these crimes? Yes, Your Honor. The judge made notes. Very well, I'll schedule a sentencing hearing for 6 weeks from today. Until then, you'll remain in federal custody. It was over in 10 minutes. I sat there as they led Evan away. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, just shuffled out of the courtroom in his shackles, head down, shoulders slumped, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness. The sentencing hearing was different. This time, the courtroom was full. Press in the front rows, Titan employees in the middle, family in the back. Helen Vance presented the case, outlined the crimes, showed financial records and shipment manifests and GPS logs, built an irrefutable narrative of greed and betrayal. Then it was the defense's turn. Thomas Pike, Evan's lawyer, stood up. He talked about Evan's upbringing, his education, his career, painted him as a man who'd made mistakes but who was fundamentally good. It was nonsense. But he delivered it with conviction. When Pike finished, the judge looked at me. Mr. Calder, I understand you'd like to give a victim impact statement. I stood up, walked to the front of the courtroom, stood at the podium facing the judge, with Evan sitting 20 feet to my right. I didn't look at him. Quote, 378. I began. Quote, 370. I paused, found my voice. Quote, 380. My hands gripped the podium. Quote, 381. I stepped down. The courtroom was silent. The judge made notes, and then she looked at Evan. Quote, 382. Evan stood. His voice shook. Quote, 383. The judge's expression didn't change. But I quote, 384. She paused. Quote, 385. Evan's legs buckled. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. I walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunshine. Mara was waiting on the steps. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know. Empty, I guess. That'll pass. Will it? Eventually, she took my hand. Come on, let's go home. We drove back to our house, back to our normal, quiet life, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Evan's face in the courtroom, the way he'd looked when the judge announced his sentence, the way he'd stumbled as they led him away, and I wondered if, years from now, I'd regret what I'd done, if I'd wish I'd protected him instead of exposing him. But then I remembered the tracker on my truck, the lies, the trap he'd built, the cold calculation behind every move, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt, and some sons stop being sons long before the law catches up with them. Life after the sentencing was strange. People treated me differently, some with pity, some with respect. Some avoided me entirely, like turning in your own son was contagious. I didn't care, not really. I went back to work, fixed cars, rebuilt engines, lost myself in the mechanical precision of things that made sense. Unlike people, unlike family. 3 months after Evan went to prison, a package arrived at our house. No return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Quote, 93. My hands shook as I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The video opened, black and white security footage. Timestamp, October 14th, 10:47 p.m. The camera showed my driveway from an angle I recognized, the view from the neighbor's security system, and there was Evan's Audi pulling up. I watched as Evan got out, looked around, pulled something from his trunk, a small black box, the tracker. He walked to my truck, crouched down, spent 5 minutes attaching the device to the undercarriage, careful, methodical, not rushed. When he finished, he stood up, and then, for just a moment, he looked directly at my house. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but the body language was unmistakable. No guilt, no hesitation, just cold efficiency. He got back in his car and drove away. The video ended. Mara found me an hour later, still sitting at the laptop, staring at the blank screen. Dean? I showed her the note, told her about the video. She watched it in silence. When it ended, she closed the laptop. You needed to see that, she said quietly. Why? Because now you know. Not just intellectually, not just through evidence and testimony. You saw him do it. You saw him make the choice to betray you. She took my hand. And you can stop wondering if maybe, somehow, there was a misunderstanding. There wasn't. He knew exactly what he was doing. She was right. The last small hope that maybe Evan had been desperate, that maybe he'd been scared, that maybe deep down, he'd still been the son I remembered. But that video showed the truth. He was calm, professional, cold. He'd planned it, executed it, and moved on without a second thought. I never watched the video again, but I kept it, saved it on a separate hard drive, locked it in a drawer, just in case I ever started to doubt myself. Spring turned to summer. Mara and I fell into new rhythms. She started volunteering at the hospital more. I took on more consulting work. We went to dinner with friends, watched movies, pretended we were just a normal couple in our 50s enjoying life, and mostly it worked. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and lie there in the dark, thinking about Evan, wondering if he was okay, wondering if he'd made friends in prison, wondering if he ever thought about what he'd done, wondering if he was sorry. I never tried to find out, never wrote to him, never visited. Mara thought that was healthy. Bobby thought I was in denial. My therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Reeves, who Mara had convinced me to see, said it was complicated. They were all right. In July, I got a call from Helen Vance. Mr. Calder, I wanted to let you know that Lena Farrow has been released from custody. I sat up straighter. Already? I thought she had 10 years. She did, but she served 18 months in a minimum security facility and was released on good behavior with time served and credit for cooperation. That's bullshit. I know, but that's how the system works sometimes. White-collar criminals, especially those who cooperate, get reduced sentences. Has she contacted you? No, and she's not allowed to. Part of her release conditions include a restraining order. She can't contact you or Mrs. Calder. If she does, let me know immediately. I will. One more thing. Lena's required to pay restitution, part of the court order. She's selling assets to cover it, including the house. Good. I thought you'd want to know. After she hung up, I told Mara. Lena's out. I heard. You were on speaker. She's not allowed to contact us. Do you think that'll stop her? I don't know. Mara smiled grimly. If she's smart, she'll disappear. Start over somewhere else. But something tells me Lena's not that smart. 2 weeks later, Lena proved Mara right. I was in my garage when a car pulled up. A rental, by the look of it. And out stepped Lena. She looked different, thinner, older. Her hair was darker, cut shorter. She wore jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of her usual designer outfits. She walked to the garage door and stopped. Dean, she said. I set down my wrench. You're not supposed to be here. I know, I needed to talk to you. Why? Because I owe you an apology. You owe me a lot more than that. She flinched. I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. For going along with Evan, for not stopping him, for being part of it. You weren't just part of it. You helped him. You laundered money. You lied. You were in it as deep as he was. I know. Her voice cracked. I know, and I've had 18 months to think about it, to realize how wrong I was, how much I hurt people. And I wanted you to know that I'm trying to make amends. I'm paying restitution. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm trying to be better. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her face, the defeat in her posture. Lena, I don't care if you're better. I care that you destroyed my family. And no amount of therapy or restitution changes that. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you do. I think you're here because you want me to tell you it's okay. That we forgive you, that everything can go back to normal. I stepped closer. But it can't. You and Evan made choices. And those choices have consequences. For you, for him, for me, for everyone. I know, she whispered. Then leave. Go start your new life somewhere else. But stay away from me and my wife. Because if you come back here, if you contact us again, I'll call the FBI and you'll be back in prison. Do you understand? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said again. Then she got in her rental car and drove away. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Mara came out of the house. Was that Lena? Yeah. What did she want? To apologize. And I told her to stay away. Mara hugged me. Good. You didn't owe her kindness. You didn't owe her closure. You only owed her the truth. I hope she listened. If she didn't, we'll deal with it. Lena never came back. Fall arrived. The leaves turned, the air got cold, and life continued its slow, steady march forward. I thought about Evan less, not because I'd forgiven him, but because the anger had burned itself out. All that was left was sadness and acceptance. My son had made his choices, I'd made mine, and that was that. On a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after I'd found the tracker, Bobby called. Quote, her full quote, 445, in quote, 446, or quote, 447, or quote, 448. I drove to Bobby's garage, curious and wary. Inside, Bobby was standing with a kid, maybe 20, 22, skinny, nervous, wearing work clothes covered in grease. Dean, this is Marcus, Bobby said. He's been working with me for a few months. Good kid, great mechanic, but he's got a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus looked at the floor. My dad's in prison, fraud, embezzlement, same kind of thing your son did. I froze. And I didn't know what to do, Marcus continued. I was angry, ashamed, guilty, like maybe I should have seen it coming, should have stopped him. Bobby told me about your story, about what you went through, and I wanted to meet you, to know that I'm not the only one dealing with this. I looked at Bobby. He shrugged. Figured you two could talk, help each other out. You know, two people who understand what it's like when family betrays you. Marcus was still looking at the floor. I know it's weird, and if you don't want to talk, I get it. But I just needed to know that someone else survived this, that it's possible to move forward. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, it's possible. Not easy, but possible. Marcus looked up. How? You accept it. You accept that the person you thought you knew doesn't exist anymore. You grieve for them, and then you move on. But how do you move on when everyone keeps asking questions? When they look at you like you're responsible? You tell them the truth, that you're not responsible, that you didn't commit the crime, that you're just someone who got hurt by someone else's choices. I paused. And then you prove them wrong. You live your life. You work hard. You be decent. And eventually, people see that you're not your father. You're you. Marcus nodded slowly. Bobby said you turned your son in, that you helped send him to prison? I did. Do you regret it? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Sometimes, I admitted. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder if I could have done something different, if I could have saved him somehow. But then I remember what he tried to do to me, and I know that some people can't be saved. They can only be stopped. And you stopped him. Yeah, I did. Marcus extended his hand. Thank you for talking to me, for being honest. I shook his hand. You're going to be okay, Marcus. It takes time, but you'll get there. After Marcus left, Bobby poured us coffee. That was good of you, he said. It was strange, but good. Kid needed to hear it from someone who'd been through it, someone who survived. I'm not sure I've survived. I'm still here, that's all. That's enough. We drank coffee in silence. Then Bobby said, You know what I think. What? I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You stood up to your son. You did the right thing even when it hurt, and now you're helping other people who are going through the same thing. That's not surviving, Dean. That's living. Maybe. No maybe about it. You're a good man. Don't forget that. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe Bobby was right. Maybe I was living, not just surviving. Maybe that was enough. That night, Mara and I sat on the back porch watching the stars. "You've been quiet," she said. "Just thinking." About? About how a year ago I was so angry, so hurt, and now I'm just tired. That's normal. Anger burns hot, but it burns out eventually. What's left is whatever was underneath. And what's underneath? For you? Decency, strength, love. She squeezed my hand. "You're a good man, Dean Calder. Don't let what Evan did make you forget that." "I'll try." That's all any of us can do. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just being. And for the first time in a year, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not closure, just peace. And that was enough.